Okay, welcome. So today is our Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting. So I hope you're ready for some relaxation into health, wealth, and happiness. Now you think that you understand something about what that means, and of course that's why, to the degree that you think you understand it, that to that very same degree you are failing to recognize the reality of it. So let go of what you think you understand, and we'll start with the word relax. So you think you understand something about that, and notice that whatever you think you understand about it, it's automatic. You're not trying to think that you understand it; just happens. But I want you to see that you think you have some understanding of that, and so look to see what that understanding is. Where does it come from? And you'll see that that understanding, it conjures up all of this past. So you're having to reference a past in order to have that understanding. So, because otherwise you have no idea, consider for a moment that you are like well, just imagine that you are a newborn infant. Someone says, relax. What is the meaning of that to you? Absolutely nothing. It's some sound, but it has no meaning. So it has to be that along the way you assembled that meaning. You've come up with the meaning that you have assigned to that sound, and that meaning, as I've already pointed out, it conjures the past, because that is the meaning. The meaning comes from the past. The past is the meaning. There's no difference between them. So every time that you consult that, what you're doing is you're going to the past, and you don't like that. You don't like that experience. You don't like what the past has to offer because it's dead. It's unfulfilling. So now you see perhaps where it is that you get stuck. You say, sounds great. I'd love to relax into health, wealth, and happiness. But immediately you find yourself stuck because you're not actually opening to the freshness of what that invitation is. Instead, you're going into the past. Well, as I pointed out, maybe we could get around that if we didn't use those particular sounds, but then we would run into other problems. So we work with what we have. So we use the mind to reveal the non-existence of the mind. We use the words that have the associated meanings in order to point to the emptiness of those sounds. So just see that what's being offered here is truly something fresh. It is something alive, and it is not dependent upon anything. So you don't need to go and consult the past. Well, of course, then there'll be objections that come. The mind will say, but then this is just all nonsense, and how do I do anything with it? And how do I make sense of it? And well, the way it works is that you just simply have to continue to relax into health, wealth, and happiness. You see, because this idea that you have of what it means to relax, it necessarily excludes everything else, right? So if I say relax, then you have an idea of what that means, and notice that that's in contrast with what everything else is not to relax, which is an enormous amount, right? I mean, it's like everything other than to relax. So to relax is something very specific that you have an idea about. And everything else, which is to say basically infinity, is not that. And of course, what are the chances of that one very specific thing happening at all, much less for any sustained period of time? It's enormously small. I mean, the odds are so remarkably against it that it's really not going to happen. So this is why people will suffer interminably so long as they continue on insisting that they have any idea of what it is that they have any idea about the truth. If they think they know anything about the truth, if they think they know anything about the peace that they're seeking, if they think that they know anything at all, they'll continue to suffer, because the suffering is that clinging to the idea, because the idea is the past, and the past has already been proven to be dissatisfying. So what is, now I understand that to the mind, this is just, oh, it's frustrating, it's crazy making, I get it, but persist. Because I promise you, I wouldn't just, I wouldn't be extending an invitation that's not authentic. So even though you're trying and you're not, and you're frustrated and it doesn't seem to quite make sense, that's okay. That's just part of the process. And that is actually what it is to relax. Now, you're going to think that's insane, but actually look and see that the opposite is true. To insist that you know what it is to relax when you clearly do not, when everything about your life proves that you don't, isn't it insane to insist that you know? That's the insanity. And so, yes, when you cling to the insane, then what is sane appears to be insane. That's true, but it doesn't make it true that it is insane. It just means that you're clinging to the false and calling it true. And the way to prove this to yourself, or at least to open to that, is to recognize, just acknowledge the truth, which is that you have not succeeded at all in your endeavor to be successful fundamentally. You really have not. And so everything that you think you know ultimately is the suffering that you suffer from. And you can keep trying to accumulate that. You think, well, if I just get more, somehow it's all going to work. But it doesn't, it's not going to work like that. You need less, not more. Don't you already have enough burden? Isn't it already enough trouble? Aren't you under enough strain already? So what you need is less, but you see that what surfaces then is there's a fear. I mean, fear is too polite of a word. I don't know what else to call it. It's terror. It's can be very intense. That's the right way. That's the correct direction, because you have to see that's the one thing that you haven't really fully allowed. That's actually what everything you think you know tells you to go in the opposite direction, right? Everything that you think you know, where you say, oh, I've been successful, I have success, I've done it correctly, I've had a positive experience, I've achieved something. The way that what is your reference point to know that that's true? And you have to see it's not an absolute reference point. It was all relative. The only reason that you believe that that is true is because you believe that that's true. There's no absolute reference for success in the terms that you understand it. So it's a relative success. And unfortunately, it's like a castle in the air. You can't inhabit it. It doesn't do anything for you. It won't provide shelter. It won't provide protection. It won't provide anything because it's not real. And as long as you cling to that, then you will reject what it is that is real, because you'll call it unreal. Or at the very least, you'll be so terrified that you won't even be willing to actually fully engage with it or allow it. So you need to see that everything that you have clung to all of your ideas, everything that you think you know, all of your so-called successes, you want to recognize that they have not actually delivered in the fullest sense on what it is that you truly desire, which is true peace, true rest, true fulfillment. So what is the one thing, I've already answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the one thing that you haven't honestly considered and allowed all the way? And it's that terror. That's the one thing, because you can only go so far before you recoil and you say, that's not it. And how do you know that that's not it? Because you say, well, it's just obvious. Unfortunately, it's only obvious because it's not true, but it's so-called obvious because of a fundamental assumption, which is that castle in the air. You see, as long as you assume that the castle in the air is in fact a real castle and that it's yours and that it provides you or can provide you with what you need and want, then you'll reject everything else as false or unreal. You won't even be able to see it. You won't even be able to see the true as true. You'll only be able to see the false as true, because that's how this life works. This waking state is non-different fundamentally from the dream state. They are both dreams. We call this being awake, but it's not being awake. This is also a dream. You can see that that's true because that's obvious. No, I can't, that's not fair. You can see that that's true because you can look, you can observe and see what differentiates this waking state, so-called, from dream state. And you'll see there's nothing actually that differentiates it. When you're experiencing the dream state and you're immersed in it and you're asleep, that is real to you. In that dream state, if whatever it is that you perceive is real, that's real. Now, it doesn't matter. Like you can be asleep next to somebody else who's asleep, and you're having your dream, and they're having their dream, and they don't mix. You're not having the same experience. Your perception is 100% what is real to you. So it's true in the dream state, it's true in the waking state. In the dream state, you're perceiving that that's real. Of course, when you wake up, you realize, oh, it was a dream. That was strange that I thought that was real, because it doesn't even make any sense. But it made perfect sense in the dream. Similarly, this all makes perfect sense to you as long as you're asleep to it. But when you awaken, which I'm inviting you to right now, just to be awake right now, which means just to drop all of the ideas that you have about what is and what's true and what's untrue, and just to see what is as it is. You can notice that the sounds that are being made right now, they don't have any inherent meaning. If you did not understand English, they would just be sounds. So it's only conditioning. But it's deeper than that, because this whole reality, English and Swahili and French and all the other languages, they're all completely fabricated in your imagination. The entire thing, the same way as in the dream state, that you notice that in a dream state, there's people speaking, communication happening. And it all seems coherent, it makes sense in the dream, but when you wake, if you reflect upon it, you might think, what were those sounds? Those sounds didn't make any sense. You see, well, how was it that you understood it in the dream? Because it was entirely your imagination. It was only what you were perceiving. It doesn't matter. There's no objective reality out there independent of your perception. Same is true in the waking state. So all of the languages are all completely your fabrication. They're in your imagination. So how is it that this comprehension could take place at all? And you see that it's only happening as one consciousness. It's the same as in the dream. In the dream, you it, all of these characters, all of this stuff happening, but there's only one consciousness. When you wake, you think, oh, it's my consciousness. But the same consciousness in the dream is the same consciousness that's perceiving this. You think, oh, it's my consciousness. I'm awake now. But how do you know that that's true? You see, it's just an assumption. It's the same as in the dream. You think that, oh, that I'm me, and that's obvious. But it's not obvious. It's just a belief. You say, well, but other people acknowledge me. Other people acknowledge that I'm me. Well, of course they do. They're also in your dream. I mean, unless they don't, but then it's still in your dream. You know, you could have a dream in which I'm sure it happens to people where they're invisible. Like nobody, they're like going through life and they're like a ghost and nobody can see them or hear them. It's like that movie, The Sixth Sense. I see dead people. So here you notice that in the dream or in the waking state, same thing. So dream. In any case, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of doing, there's a lot of trying, a lot of strain, a lot of effort, a lot of trying to figure it out, understand, get something, get rid of something, protect, defend, acquire, etc. So a lot of activity, a lot of effort, and a lot of focus, and all of that is predicated upon the assumption that there's something that's obvious. You see, here's one that like, hey, you probably heard this one before. What came first, the chicken or the egg? And that's one of those things that maybe we are like, oh, that's cute. Actually, that's a very, very good. It's like a Zen koan, really. I mean, contemplate that. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? So how did any of this come to be? And when you really sincerely contemplate that, which I'm inviting you to right now, you have to admit that this is a dream. The same, like if in a dream, okay, well, just remember a dream that you've had. You don't have to remember all the details, but just so that you can know that you've had this experience of dreaming. So recall some dream, and then ask yourself this question: what was the beginning of that dream universe? How did it come into being? What was its origin? What's its creation story? You know, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and yada yada, or was it, what was the creation story of that dream universe? Do you see that it was all actually just an assumption? Because upon waking, you realize, well, clearly that dream universe didn't really have a beginning as such. It simply appeared. There was simply the appearance, and that appearance, it was meaningless inherently, but there was a projection of meaning with the whole notion of there being a beginning and there being time and space and activity and relationships and all of that. all that there was an assumption of that. And based on that assumption, everything else follows. So in the dream, you imagine, you're being chased by the bad guys in the dream, and we got to run, we got to get away from the bad guys, and you're leaping over walls and whatever you're doing. And you notice there, but how did that all begin? And you see, if you really observe, you'll see, well, there was no beginning. There was simply the assumption that it was real. There was because see, there were no bad guys. There are no bad guys. It was a dream. So the whole assumption is what makes it seem real. And then we say, but it's obvious. It's only obvious because you assume. So now let's transfer that to this waking state and see the same is true. What is the beginning of this? What came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, can you see how absurd it is? Like very serious scientists, they I don't know how they can do it without laughing. Say, what's the beginning of the universe? The Big Bang. The Big Bang, excuse me. How old are you? 3? Like, that's the best you could come up with? It's a Big Bang. I mean, it's good. That's the best they can come up with, because it's like, if anybody cares to look, then it becomes obvious that this whole thing is insane. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? The answer is the Big Bang. And it's fair enough. It's a Big Bang like that right now. Bang. Because there was neither a chicken nor an egg first. There's simply the assumption that there's a chicken and an egg. Now, of course, you say, and I I understand. I've got chickens. You sometimes hear them, I'm sure. And so you say, but there are real chickens. Come on, Joey. What are you doing? Why are you messing with us like this? We know you have chickens. This is a dream. Same, in a dream, there can be chickens. But upon waking, what happens to the chickens? So you see, is there an appearance of chicken? Yes. But what determines that there is an appearance of chicken? It's imagination based on an assumption that says there is diversity and I am this thing. So you have now some very knowledge is extraordinarily powerful. Of course, you have to look and see for yourself directly the truth of it, because otherwise it's just like, I don't know, like it's like a philosophy class or something. It's not really all that valuable. But if you really sincerely look and see the truth of that in your own experience, if you see, so okay, here's one of the obstacles that can come to really accepting that. I say, but how can I know for sure? And I've talked about this before. It's like you feel like you have to get hold of it so that you can study it and prove that it's an assumption. But you can't get hold of something that's not there. So it's like with the mirage, so the mirage appear there's a phenomenon in which it's an optical illusion where we think, oh, there's water, but it's not water, it's a mirage. It's the appearance that we hallucinate that it's water, but it's not. So can you prove by getting hold of the mirage that it's not water? Obviously not. And you might say, but those fancy dancy scientists, they've proven it with their whatever. But nobody has ever gotten hold of the mirage to prove that it's not water. Nobody's ever gotten hold of the end of the rainbow to prove that there's no pot of gold there. Nobody's ever got hold of anything. It's all theoretical, and you can come up with theoretical proofs, but it's a theory. But you can just observe and realize directly that there is nothing there, because you can observe that at every level. You can observe that there is no anything. And if you want the most direct, most powerful method to end suffering and realize liberation, there you have it. Just simply observe. Observing is not about thinking. Observing doesn't require that you have any words. It doesn't require that you have any, you don't have to be a sophisticated philosopher. All that's required is that you just simply observe. And as you observe, you slow down and you just notice what is actually here. And you see that prior to any thought, there is no evidence that there is anything. The thought is the only thing that we have that suggests that there is something. Now that gets, I understand at a superficial level, that seems like, well, that's not satisfying. Of course it's not, because that at a superficial level, it's just a philosophy, and it doesn't do you any real good at that level. You have to really assimilate it by taking the actually receiving the invitation and doing something with it. You have to actually do what's suggested, which is to observe. So practically speaking, I mean, I've given you the practical, but let's look at it even in more practical terms. What is that? What could that look like? I mean, it could look like anything, but let's say you just notice. Well, we've talked about some of these things before, but we'll review them. So, you can notice, for example, okay, you say, well, look, there's a glass here. And you say, it's obvious there's a glass, but hold on, we're not accepting that as an answer. We're going to observe. So what is it that can actually be said? What is this? Well, okay, simple thing we can start with is there anything here outside of my experience? Okay. So, or put another way, how can I know about the existence of this glass independent of my experience? And if we really observe that, we see, well, there is no way, because everything everything that I know is my experience. There's nothing outside of that I can say anything about. My idea that I exist is my experience. My idea of the objective world is my experience. There's only that. Okay, so then say, okay, so a glass seems to exist in my experience. Okay, but then what does that experience consist of? Because experience, you see, so far these are words, right? We say, well, everything exists in my experience. So we could just say, well, then it's real because it exists in my experience. But what is experience? We've got a word there, but what is it? Well, we've got thinking and sensing. That kind of sums it up. So you can look, is there, independent of thinking or sensing, is there anything that we can say that exists? We've already identified that all that exists is at least as far as I'm aware, is what I would call my experience. And then when we look at what my experience is, well, what does that consist of? It consists of thinking and sensation. sensing. So taste, touch, smell, etc. So we can look, is there anything else other than that? No, not, does not seem like it. Okay, so now, obviously I have a thought. It's a glass. Okay, so there's the thought. We'll come back around to that in a moment. Let's look at the sensing. Okay, so we've got, I can see something. I can hear it. I can touch. Okay. Doesn't really have a smell, but some things might have a smell. Maybe some things have a taste. Something in my water. Oh, a little something in there. So we've got this sensing. Okay. Now we look at, okay, but with the sensing aspect, independent of the sensing, is there something there that I can say is the glass? Can I know that there's anything there without sensing, without, independent of the sensing? And the only thing I have is thought, the thought that says there's glass. Okay, so I have the sensing. That's fair enough, that I still can hear it, touch it. Okay, but independent of that, is there actually any proof that there's a thing there? No, there's just the sensing. So what I call the glass really consists just of the senses and the thought. All right, so then we can look, so we can, so all of everything that my whole reality, this whole universe, all of creation consists of thought and sensing. Well, we can even further reduce it, so now sense, with each of these sensing, say, well, what is that? What is that? How do I know that that exists? How do I know that that's something? And you'll see that it's only because there's a thought that says so. So, the thought says I'm touching. But otherwise we don't know. It's just the thought. So we can kind of just reduce everything down to thought. Oh, okay. So then we've got thought. So all of creation is thought. Well then, okay, let's see, what is thought? Does thought have substance? Because remember, we're looking for like a material, objective reality out there, something independent. So thought, it's like thought's our last hope. Help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope. So, we're looking at thought. So you want to just look at thought and see, what is this thought? So independent of the thought that there's a substance to the thought, is there any substance to the thought? Or say independent of a thought that says there's thought, is there any thought? It's like the whole if you just look at it sincerely, you see you can't actually get hold of anything. There's nothing there. Now, then the only real, I mean, if you do this sincerely, then you have to see that. But then what almost inevitably happens is then, there's doubts, and the doubts will say, well, but then it still seems real, and I still seem real, and so I still seem to be suffering, and so I guess it didn't work, or it's not true. It's like you see that the mirage is a mirage, it's not water, and then but I still see the mirage, so now I guess maybe it's water. No, you know that you've clearly recognized that it's not water, it's a mirage, and the mirage is not a thing. I mean, I guess, according to, you could say that there's theory that it's like refraction of light, and light can be understood as a material substance that is a wave or a particle, and whatever you could, but it will not quench your thirst. Speaking of which, um, so when you sincerely do this investigation, you have to, it just has to be that you see that there's nothing here. Well, okay, so then the next obstacle, the next doubt will be, well, how could there be nothing? Because obviously there's something. But there's actually, it's you see this, the idea that it's obvious that there's something is just another thought. But we've already seen that thought is void, it's empty. There's nothing there. So it's not obvious that there's something. Instead, there's neither something nor nothing. And so this is like, it's the same as the mirage in that sense. So can you observe the appearance of the mirage? Yes. Is it water? No. But then the mistake is to say, but it's appearing, so it's water. It's like, so you can observe this, your experience, and you see, you can just do the observation, the inquiry that we just went through. You see that all there is this experience, and this experience can be seen to be only these constituent parts, and those constituent parts can all be reduced just to thought, and thought can, when observed, is found to be empty. So how can we then claim that there's something? That would be insane. Again, it would be like saying that just because there's the appearance of the mirage, that there's water. We've already cleared this up, but then we fall back into the same trap. It's like You get out of the pit and only to fall back into the pit. And you keep repeating that over and over and over. And you say, why do I keep falling into the pit? Well, because you keep falling into the pit. Stop doing that. But you have to be watchful. And there's a question here. It says, memory supports the thoughts, and that's why they seem happening when actually nothing happens. Well, that's at a certain level, we could say that's true, but here we can look at that a little bit more clearly and see that the memory is just another thought, and the thought is empty. So you see, it's the same as like you have a dream, and it seems like all kinds of things happen in the dream. But when you wake up, you don't say that those things happened. They didn't happen. So we have to see the same is true here. There's all the things that we think are happening, all the things we think have happened, they're only thoughts, and there's just an assumption that there's a material basis for that there's some objective reality that's like a record of this. Because that's believed, then that is manifest, but it's manifest as a dream. It's not any different from a dream. So anything that you can think about this. Anything that anybody puts their attention on, it becomes real in this dream. I mean, when you have enough, you have enough people who come together to put their energy into something as like crazy as colonizing Mars, and you see like that actually becomes a thing. So where you put your attention, that it becomes an apparent reality, but it's apparent only. So yes, at a certain level, we can say that memory is a causative agent, but since it itself has no cause, it does not. Neither does it exist. So it's like there's a classically, it's said there's this phrase of the barren woman's son, which is what we're talking about here. So this life, this waking state is a barren woman's son. It appears, but it has no cause, and so it itself, it's like not even. I mean, that can be extended, and it sometimes is. It's like, it's not even the barren woman's son. It's the it's the son of a barren woman who herself is the daughter of a barren woman, and ad infinitum. There is no cause, and there's no effect. At a certain level, there appears to be cause and effect, but cause and effect is just another thought. And when it's believed, then that's how we perceive, and the perception is none other than this reality. I mean, there's no difference between them, and you can just see at a very basic level. It's not even at a esoteric level. I mean, just in the ordinary sense, that's true. I mean, this whole that's how like, think about what is a nation. There is no such thing. It's just because people believe that that's so, and then they do all kinds of things, like defend their borders and go fight wars, and all kinds of things, pay taxes, but it's a fabrication. So this is true of everything. Everything is like that. So but now in a very, what is, why all of this? Why, this is like an interesting philosophy discussion, but let's look at it in a very practical sense. So this dream, okay, so you could go from one dream to the next forever, but something is dissatisfied with that. This is the drive to awaken. Something's dissatisfied with that. It's like had enough of the slumber because it's painful. Now, if you think about this, you go to sleep at night and you have a dream, and then you fall back into deep sleep, and then you have another dream. You fall back into deep sleep, you have another dream, maybe, depending on the quality of your sleep, but you can have multiple dreams, and in between them, you go into deep sleep. So this, notice though, that when one dream ends, so while that dream is happening, that's real for you. Then when the dream ends, you go into deep sleep. There's nothing happening there. And then the next dream begins. And when that next dream begins, you don't remember anything about the previous dream. You don't think, oh, this is strange that I'm here when I was, like strange that I seem to be on planet Gobbledygook now, when before I was in 18th century France in my previous dream. But you don't remember, you forget. So each dream, as it starts, it starts with an assumption, and that assumption generates a forgetfulness of everything prior. So now here's the question: how do you know? I mean, it's just a rhetorical question. How do you know that this dream you call the waking state right now is the true one? How do you know that this one that you identify with in this dream is the true self? How do you know that this dream universe is the real universe? You don't. You just assume that it is, because it's no different than the other dreams that you know about, where when you wake up from them, you realize, oh, I had 3 dreams last night. But in each dream, it seemed real. You didn't remember about the other dreams in that dream. So this dream here, what I'm suggesting is that you've forgotten about the other dreams in this very same way. And this dream exists as there's an assumption that is the basis of the entire dream. The assumption that there is an objective universe, and this is the real one, and you are this person, and this is the real you, and that it's all obvious because there's a past, and because it's so orderly and everything. But you see, all of that it happens in your dreams. So this is no different. So you've gone from dream to dream to dream to dream endlessly. And you've been looking for something. You've been looking for truth. You've been looking for peace. You've been looking for stability. You've been looking for truth. And you never found it. In none of the dreams have you ever found it. In all of the dreams, there's some sort of ambition. There's some sort of hope. There's some sort of narrative. And it's always, you're trying to get to this truth in however that however distorted it might be, but you're trying to get to something that you think will provide that satisfaction and fulfillment, and has never worked out, never will, because they're all dreams. Provide they can't provide that which is only available through wakefulness. So the practical application of this is to see that this is true. You just observe and just see, yes, this whole reality that I have assumed was objectively real has no actual substance to it. It's ungraspable, it's unfindable, it's empty. And I've been looking therefore in the wrong place because I'm looking for something that's not empty. I'm looking for something that's real. But I've been looking in the unreal for the real, so that won't work. Now, this means you don't need to see. Now you're free. So even the dream becomes happier, and that should be. If this causes the dream to be unhappy, then it's a misunderstanding. This should allow the dream to be happier, because then you see, well, I don't need to be concerned. All these things that I've been so concerned about, I don't need to be concerned. I don't need to be concerned about the economy or my, what the neighbors think, or whether I'm a good person, or whether I'm, I have financial stability, or like any of the. I don't need to be concerned about it any more than I need to be concerned about any of the things that happen in the other dreams. So I'm free, and I can choose peace, because the peace is what is clear and present. It is naturally clearly shining when I cease to look in the wrong place. So it should, if you feel that it makes the dream unhappy, then you're misunderstanding. So don't do that. It should be liberating. It should be joyful. It should make things easier. It should make your relationships easier. Everything should be easier. Everything should be more pleasant. Not because the circumstances become more pleasant, so-called objectively, but rather because you see that all of it is just an assumption. Why make assumptions that are unpleasant? As soon as you stop making unpleasant assumptions, you stop having unpleasant experience, and it doesn't matter what the appearance is. And you find that instead of looking for joy out there in so-called objective reality, instead of looking for it in other people and circumstances and relationships, you discover it in the only place that it ever has existed, which is here. And then that naturally radiates. And it doesn't matter, like, you don't need any further evidence of that. You don't need anybody else to acknowledge it. You don't need because why would you? When you recognize that this is simply always available, independent, and then you don't concern yourself with any of those things. So it's profoundly liberating. It's enormously liberating. It means you just start to see the false as false, and you stop investing needlessly in trying to gain something true from the false, because you recognize it won't work. It doesn't mean you have to like it would be wrong, incorrect, a wrong understanding to then start to denigrate the dream and say, oh, the dream is bad, the dream is ugly, the dream is disgusting, the dream is a problem, it's an obstacle. No. How could it be? That's only a wrong understanding, and that would just be to make things unhappy. Don't do that. That would be delusion. The truth that this inquiry points to, that allows you to discover directly, is that you already are joy, you already are peace, you already are radiant happiness. You know, not the one that you assumed you were, but that which truly is. So then you don't need to be, you just don't need to be so burdened by all of the unnecessary seeking and struggling to gain something false for a false self. And so the more you invite it, the more you observe, the more you allow that revelation, not as a belief, but as an authentic seeing. So it's not like, don't misunderstand it as, oh, okay, now this is my new belief, because I promise you that does not work. I mean, all the people out there who try to do that, and they walk around saying, okay, hey, I guess I can't use first person pronouns any longer. So, this one here, they start referring to themselves in that way, and it's nonsense. And or they think, oh, I should have no preferences, so, or I should, all kinds of things that are wrong understanding. So don't do that. The dream, just don't get involved in trying to. Why do you need to correct the dream? Why do you need to correct the dream character? Let it be. And see that in so doing, everything becomes lighter, everything becomes better, because you're directly recognizing the truth, not as an overlay, not a mental overlay, not a belief. As a belief, it's just another burden. It's another thing that you carry around, burdening yourself with. But as a direct revelation, it's unburdening, it's liberating, uh, it reveals that you are already so light that there's no burden can be added to you. So that's all for today. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Blessings to you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.